We're not projecting yet or anything like that, but this is a good opportunity to tell you why I deal with the frustration of only having a one-port computer. I can't do more than like one thing at a time unless I use a breakout cable, and I can't project and use that while importing. But I'm going to show you like the list of all the equipment I use for all my actual editing, and I do 99% of my editing purely from this MacBook. It's called the MacBook Adorable. It's the one-port 12-inch with Retina display. I think Apple started releasing them a couple years ago. I have the most recent one. On paper, it is a pathetic machine. It should not perform. It's got a pathetic, like, I don't know, let me see here. 16 gigs of RAM, that's not so bad. 1.4 gigahertz Intel Core i7, not the worst. But the cool thing is this thing is totally fanless and it's totally silent, no moving parts, and it is incredibly fast once you have things rendered in a special way in Lightroom. So I've been using Lightroom with bliss and speed and greatness for years. It has a ton of problems. Lightroom has a ton of problems with the way that it's coded, and my theory is the problems are so deep that if you noticed in the most recent version they installed Lightroom, like the mobile CC version on everybody's desktop and the Lightroom Classic. I have a feeling they're pushing everybody toward the new mobile build because that is one they're able to do in a way that can take advantage of computers the way that they're built now, GPUs and all of this stuff. Let me just optimize. So I have the images I just dragged onto the desktop. I'm going to go ahead and start importing them, bring in everything and talk about some stuff while that's happening. Shoot, Hannah and Anthony. I was going to say Austin. And Thunt. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Good, good, good. We're going to talk through all of this. I'm just starting it so that it's kind of running in the background. Here's a list of stuff that I use, just the baseline equipment. 12-inch MacBook One, which is this guy. At home on my desk, I do have a 5K iMac, beautiful Retina display, and at this point, if you can afford it and swing it in any way possible, please, please, please buy a computer with Retina display. And that's not just because of the high resolution, like beautiful, dense number of pixels, but because of the color spectrum that it can show. It's got a really wide color gamut. And that is what you want more accuracy of. I can generally, even on old school screens, tell if my picture is in focus or not. It is nice and pleasant to have everything at crisp, beautiful resolution, but 99% of my edit decisions are dialing in color, using white balance and split toning to the way that I want it to look, exposure, and then cropping, right? And I don't need super high resolution Retina display to do that. My external hard drives at home, I do have two completely separate towers. The brand is called Pegasus R6. Well, the model is R6. The brand is called Pegasus. And they're two separate enclosures. They're in a configuration called RAID. Nothing to know about that except that if you have RAID 5, but I have 6 drives, what happens is the enclosure itself, even though it has multiple hard drives in it, when you plug it into your computer, it shows up at just one hard drive. And it propagates the data automatically without you having to do anything across all the drives in that enclosure. So if one of those drives fails, you actually don't even notice it. You can still access, and your hard drive shows up on your computer as if nothing's wrong. You can pop in a new drive and it'll repropagate the data. So that one enclosure has a layer of redundancy there that's really nice. If you have 2 drives fail in that enclosure, you're totally screwed. So that's still, even though it has a layer of redundancy and safety there, I recommend 2 separate entire enclosures at RAID 5. I use the Pegasus R6 that have literally 6 drives of hard drives in each enclosure. That's a lot. And maybe I'll post some pictures or something like that in the video part of this to help illustrate all of this. But so those are connected to my 5K iMac all the time. And when I import, well, let me just, before I get to importing, Backblaze.com, I think it's like $5 a month, unlimited backup. That constantly monitors my undelivered in progress folder, which when I import stuff into my computer, all raw files that aren't delivered yet are in that folder, and Backblaze constantly is uploading those to the cloud. So I have a copy of my raw files on the hard drive enclosure A, hard drive enclosure B, separate entire copy. And then I also have anything that's undelivered so far going to backblaze.com. They do unlimited, and you can just say, like, monitor this folder. If it ever changes, automatically start uploading. So that's what I've done for all my raw files. And then I keep my high-res files. It used to be shoot-proof, and I still do a lot of hosting with them, but now I'm transitioning, trying out PicTime. But I actually never have JPEGs on my computer, ever. I only have the raw files and then the edits for those in my Lightroom catalog. We'll get to how that works in a minute. But and then my travel drive is this nice little Samsung 1 terabyte. The font is sort of messed up there for some reason, but it's this guy. And I just like to show it because it's unbelievably small. Solid state, 1 terabyte, bus powered, no external power required. Super fast, reliable, awesome. Expensive. It's $400 or something. It's a lot. But it's great, great, great for travel. The hard drive? Samsung, I don't know. Samsung, just portable SSD. It'll look like this, gray and black. What's that?
But Western Digital.
It's fine. I would go for anything solid state. No spinning drives as much as is possible. Yeah, no spinning drives. I think Western Digital, if you're talking about their typical hard drives, they're spinning. So.
Yeah, I dropped one a week ago and it stopped working.
Bad news. Yeah, if you drop a spinning drive, you're screwed. But
Have you tried Loopdeck out?
oh yeah, I've tried Loopdeck. Picture over here. But before we get to any of that kind of stuff, I just want to show you this video. So the reason I use 2 computers is because of this really handy feature called Target Disk Mode. I keep my Lightroom catalog and everything running on this computer. I can be editing, do whatever I need, exit out of Lightroom, and reboot this machine holding the T key. And what that does is it boots up and it starts blinking an icon. It doesn't boot up into like a regular Mac OS. It's just going to reboot. I'm literally holding the T key once it gets to the black screen. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. And then I just wait for this icon. Now it's booted in something called Target Disk Mode. What that allows me to do is take a USB-C to regular USB Type A cable. You can find those anywhere. Plug my laptop into my iMac or any other computer that I want. That plug will power it and mount it to that machine as an external hard drive. Right there, you can see the yellow right there. I am the MacBook. That is my hard drive. Once I plug it in, it pops up there on my desktop, boom. And I can open up the file system and navigate to anywhere that I want. So I just navigate to my Lightroom catalog. I have a shortcut for that set up. And once I open Lightroom, it's loading the catalog from my laptop, exactly where I left off, without having to copy any files back and forth.
You hold T while you turn it off?
As it's turning off, you don't do anything. Then once you hit power button to turn it on, you hold T immediately until you hear the chime or you see the icon.
Okay.
It's just, and then, so when I'm importing files into my Lightroom catalog, I boot this connected to my iMac, which is a much more powerful computer because it's bigger and it just has better hardware. Import and everything renders on that machine much, much, much faster than this one. Once that's all done, I'll close out of Lightroom, eject this computer, boot it up without holding the T key, and I can pick up editing with everything imported and rendered. Once I'm done editing a wedding, I close out of Lightroom, boot it up, and then I do the export and the final upload to PicTime through my 5K iMac, because it just takes like a quarter of the time. And I will do some editing from my iMac. I mean, it's a great machine. It's got a big, beautiful display, but normally I edit on the road or just on my couch or something, and this has a Retina display, and once everything is rendered, like I'll show you in a minute, it is totally fast enough to run stuff. But this machine will never import or export fast enough. So just kind of having this combo thing, if you can figure out a way to make that work in your budget, highly recommend it. Highly, highly. Literally never copying files anywhere. It's great. So, kind of an interesting use of Target Disk Mode. Somebody asked about Loupedeck, which is a hardware controller, and all these other hardware controllers that exist. I have done everything with them, and I love them, and they're fun and is like a great break from normal editing, which I use Better Touch Tool and my keyboard for. I've literally even set this up so that I've got these buttons and knobs to control Lightroom, and then this set up is a foot pedal, so I can go previous or next photo with my feet and control white balance and exposure with my hands. Because why not? It's easy to just tap your foot right, next photo, tap your foot left, previous, and you don't have to worry about that at all. As little as you can move your hands while editing, the better. But even moving my fingers from like this fader to that knob or that button is too much. And it'll become apparent why Better Touch Tool is actually a way better solution than any of this stuff. But I do use some of these cool hardware controllers just for fun as a break, maybe to like combat RSI or something if I start to feel wrist pain using my Better Touch Tool and keyboard. Yeah, so this stuff is fun, but I don't take it that seriously because they're just too big. And then you have to like lug it around. So everybody's familiar with Lightroom. Few really simple and not obvious, but stupidly simple things that you can do. Let me just find some random files. Blog posts. Yeah, that works. Just to show you how everything should look. So when you connect a memory card to your computer, one small thing that glitched up on me, and I will never trust them again to have ever fixed. When you actually connect a memory card, you'll see in the upper portion here, like an actual icon for the memory card, but you'll also notice that it pops up down here. The difference being, when you click the top one, it just automatically selects all the subfolders for you, and it's weird. It has actually left out subfolders just by accident or for whatever reason before. So what I highly recommend is look for your memory card down here, and it'll show up somewhere down here. And then you'll notice it has a tree of folders. Just select your main root one, and then make sure all include subfolders is selected there. So all you do is ignore what pops up here, go down here, select the main root folder on your memory card, and then include subfolders. I have never ever had it accidentally leave out like a random folder. What happens is if you shoot across multiple days without formatting, your memory card or your camera actually will create new subfolders, and Lightroom has just completely not imported some of those second and third folders before for no reason. And that terrifies me. So, and I haven't tested to see if they fix that glitch or not. Okay, build previews, you want that set to standard. Especially in the more recent version of Lightroom, there are newer options. Embedded in Sidecar is the newest one. That essentially gives you the full functionality and goings on of what's in Photo Mechanic. Embedded in Sidecar means it's pulling the embedded JPEG preview from the RAW file. So if you're the type of photographer that's likes to sit down and immediately start calling your session without waiting for anything to render, you might want this. But for me, I never look at my images straight out of camera. I always see that with my baseline import preset applied. So my mind isn't poisoned. I think of it as poisoning, or just predisposed to how it looks straight out of camera. Because my edits, if I A/B my final edit compared to the straight out of camera, I've always second guessed myself. I feel like I've gone way too far. So I have the same import preset that I use for everything that's not Develop, and I'll show you that in a minute. But even if that preset looks horrible, I still start from there for all my editing. So the problem with using the embedded in Sidecar feature is it shows you straight out of camera, and that's no good to me. So I completely ignore this. Minimal is too slow. Standard is what you want. You only want one-to-one previews if you zoom in on every single image, or like a vast majority of them. If you don't do that, if you just edit from the main zoomed out box, standard's fine. Build previews, smart previews, always on. Always make sure that's check marked. I'll elaborate on that in a second. Don't import suspected duplicates, that's obvious. Here's where my second copy is made to my B external hard drive at home. You just navigate to where that drive is and select it. File renaming, everything in my catalog. Because I use one catalog per year, I have a template here renaming every file the year, month, date, hour, minute, second that the image was taken. So you probably have noticed if you have a big enough catalog and you shot over 9,999 images, your camera rolls it back to 0001. And so across plus 10,000 images in your catalog, you're going to have duplicate file names for completely different images. And that's a serious danger zone. If later on you're searching for a file and like it shows maybe, it's just bad. So I deliver, and this is how I deliver it to my clients with this timestamp. Everything has its own unique file name this way, and it just makes sense for my brain. And everything's always easily ordered as well in client galleries, as long as your cameras are synced in time. Okay. Here is keywords, is how I organize things for a whole year. All I have to do is remember the year that I photographed something, and then I can search by keyword, client name, location, venue name, all that stuff. This is a pretty key thing. Apply during import, develop settings. This is where all your presets are saved. Good Lord, this is slow. I think it's because I'm doing the screen recording. Okay. All your presets will be saved here. Obviously, I have a bunch from Develop. And this is a good time to talk about that. Develop is a preset company made by Jeff Newsom, actually, and a couple other friends. They did an amazing thing. They took basically every camera that matters and created a custom calibration profile for that camera. All of their presets are built from that as sort of the foundation. And what's cool is they color matched them. So they color matched for contrast, or for color and for contrast from one sensor to the next. So if you're shooting with a Canon 5D Mark III and you import and edit stuff from the Canon 5D Mark IV, if you're using Develop presets, the colors will not need tinkering, except for maybe like a lens adjustment or something that they can't really account for. But they also do something else with their profiles. It's called dual illuminant profiles. And they actually have two reference points for white balance instead of one. They have a tungsten reference point and a daylight reference point. So they can blend and mix lighting to a much higher quality. I just find that editing in mixed light sources is generally a lot easier than if I just use the Adobe standard profile or something like that. The other great thing about Develop as a company is that, yeah, they have photographers that made presets like me and other people, but I don't have to support feature camera stuff. If you've ever purchased a preset from a photographer, they generally expect you to shoot with their cameras and equipment if you want the exact same look and style that they have. And when new cameras come out, like, what do? You have to wait for that photographer to remake their camera or presets, and it just becomes a mess. So Develop kind of future-proofs for me in that they're a company that manages all that. I don't have to do anything, which is kind of nice. But all that being said, everything we talk about today is going to use the Adobe, the camera standard profile, because that's the one everybody has access to, and it's fine. It just has some shortcomings that Develop has sort of solved. So in case you hear me promoting or talking about Develop later, that's why I use them. All right. So other than that, my main import is just in a dated folder that is saved. That is where all my edits are done. I don't organize my raw folders by client name or venue name or anything. It's just a dated folder. I never shoot more than one event in a day, so it works out. If I did, I would just make the date -2 for the second event. Okay, and that's it. Once you hit import, you should be seeing what I'm seeing here. I'm gonna close. Okay, it's still building standard. So this takes a long, long time on this machine, like I mentioned, why? But there's a few other things that you should do in Lightroom to optimize for speed. If you go to Lightroom, then catalog settings, make sure standard preview size is set to 2880 or whatever the largest option is. This is the resolution of the preview you're seeing in library mode, which is where you're going to do all your really fast culling and stuff like that. Preview quality set to high, and automatically discard you can whenever you want after 30 days. And that's just the one-to-one previews, which is really annoying. But yeah, there's that section. And then if you want to go to Lightroom preferences, good. the performance tab is what you want to look for, this one here. I generally recommend use graphics processor turned off. Maybe they fixed this glitch, but if you had it on, it used to like half-second blink, just a black box every time you change an image. It was really annoying and distracting if you're doing hundreds of edits. Set this to be checkmarked. I think it is by default now, but make sure it's on. Use smart previews instead of originals for image editing. Make sure that's on. And so let's talk about smart previews for a second, because they are one of the most critical things for speed and sort of like a fourth last-ditch backup if you needed. You saw in the import dialog box I had import with smart previews checked. What this does is create a low-resolution DNG file of your raw image. So it literally takes like your 6, 7, 8,000 image raw file from whatever camera you're shooting and makes like a 2,500 image DNG raw file from it. 2,500 pixels wide is a lot less processing power for your computer to have to deal with than 8,000 or whatever. Your smart previews sit here. So if you have your Lightroom catalog, you'll notice when you render smart previews, you get a little sidecar file. If you could crack that thing open and look in it, you would literally just see folders of small resolution DNG files. It's not really a mystery. It just auto creates it and puts them in here. This sidecar file here are the JPEG previews that are rendered when you're in library mode. So just so you have a sense of where things are going, this catalog saves all your edits and organization of stuff. These are the low resolution DNG files, and these are the JPEGs that you're seeing in library mode. So you always want to have smart previews rendered. I'm not going to do it today because it takes a lot longer, but what's really cool about it is when you have it done, you can actually export like a 2,500 pixel JPEG from your smart previews. And I actually don't reconnect and export the high-res files from my raw images unless I'm doing the full-res upload for my clients. If I'm doing a blog post, social media, whatever, I literally just export from the smart previews. And if you travel a lot or have a laptop, you can compress essentially like an 80 gigabyte wedding down to a couple of gig. So you can travel with a huge amount of work that you're working on without having to use external drives. So anyway, I feel like I'm throwing a lot of stuff out there, but bottom line, use smart previews always. You can render them after you've imported. If you haven't done it when you import it, you can just select any images when you're in library mode, go to library, previews, build smart previews. And then you can also build standard previews here as well. And then you can also discard. So once I've delivered a wedding and the high-res files are sitting in the client galleries, I go here and discard the smart previews to just save on space, because eventually that gets gigantic. This sidecar file, if I didn't close it, which I did, yeah, this sidecar file has, for me, gotten as large as like 100 gigabytes, which is just massive. Cool. Okay, what else? There's two other things you can do to optimize for just pure blissful speed. One is, I'm gonna keep rendering standard, here we go. If you go to your applications folder, or if you're on Windows, it should give you some option. Just go to your application icon, whatever. And again, some people get confused. This is just a folder that has your application icon. It's like weird. But the point is, get to this actual application icon, right click, go to Get Info, and then Open in Low Resolution. So this is sort of playing into, you won't have this option unless you have a Retina display, but it kind of plays into the whole Retina thing. Again, 99% of my decisions don't care if I have perfectly high resolution buttons and knobs and faders and stuff. I just want to see crop, exposure, white balance, all my color stuff. And opening low res pushes like 1/4 of the pixels in Lightroom. So it's just way easier for your computer to handle. So I highly recommend it. I take performance over that any day of the week. So you just close out of Lightroom, make sure that's check marked, open Lightroom back up, and it'll just always open that way unless you go back in and change it.
What's the pitfall of doing that?
There is none. It just visually looks more blocky. You won't have the crisp thing. It won't affect the resolution of your importing or exporting or anything with your actual files. It's just literally what it's projecting as the Lightroom GUI is more blocky and pixelated.
Okay.
But it's faster.
Yeah.
So. it's ideal. There are also apps that like allow you to toggle it faster and easier, but I just get info and keep it on all the time. And there's one other thing that is shockingly going to improve your performance, and it's simply just minimizing the histogram like that. You know, you just minimize it like that. And I kid you not, it'll like double the speed of things. It's absolutely mind-blowing how poorly Lightroom was made as a software piece. I mean, not in every way, but this is silly. Yeah, minimize that. I also minimize the navigator window, but I haven't actually seen a performance difference in minimizing this. Yeah, I keep my histogram minimized in library and develop modes. Okay, so the longest, most tedious part of the entirety of my workflow is just waiting for things to render. Usually when I get home from a wedding, I import my memory cards overnight, and when I wake up, all of this crap is rendered. Standard preview, smart previews, whatever, and I'm just ready to roll with absolute speed, just like this. This computer is still rendering, so it's gonna lock up at some point and not like allow me. Some of these don't have my preset on it. These are just straight out of camera. But just to like fly through it real quick so you can get a sense of the whole session. Fun times. Man, I took a lot, 835 pictures. I think half of those was our group picture, but. Okay, while this is still rendering, let me start one more recording and just talk about edits. And then we'll actually go through and start editing the session. All right, let me get just a reasonably normal picture that looks sort of good, even though it's not rendered yet, just to have something. She looks like she doesn't like him at all, but that's okay. Let's get something slightly more expressive.
So you do all your culling in Lightroom only?
Yeah, Lightroom only. Yeah. And again, it'll be faster than this once it's rendered. But let's talk about edits. This loading time and everything, just ignore it. Pretend that what I say is true. There we go. Okay, so I'm not going to talk through develop stuff. So my develop settings, all my different sliders and stuff like that for all my develop presets are totally different because I have a completely different camera profile. Camera standard looks totally different than all of these other profiles that are in here. But camera standard and Adobe standard is generally pretty good. If you don't want to deal with a preset company like develop and all that, just stick with that. It's fine for the most part. This is what's applied to everything. It's essentially, that should be 0. It's essentially just a process of pushing shadows, pulling back highlights, and creating some blacker blacks. Never touching the white slider, never touching the contrast slider, and just going from there. This is the dehaze slider I mentioned earlier today, where I will use this, maybe even in a situation like this, just to punch through a little bit of lost contrast in you know, shooting through an object of some kind, like a leaf or a prism. But at the end of the day, my bread and butter edits are dialing in white balance to be perfect, and then just nudging exposure. The way that I do that very, very quickly is with this fabled tool, Better Touch Tool. And there's a lot of actual software that'll do this. There's another one called Keyboard Maestro that's even more impressive and advanced. Has nothing to do with Adobe. It is a plugin a developer made to make his life easier. It sits on top of your operating system. I think it's pay what you want. It's very, very cheap. Essentially, this is what it does. You can say, okay, when I'm in Lightroom, override keyboard shortcuts with what I want. And like the sky's the limit, essentially, with what you can have it do. Man, this is really weird. I don't know why it's saying cannot. But
Dehaze with the new update?
yeah, if you don't see dehaze as an option, you probably have like version 5 of Lightroom or something. Do you? It should be there.
Sometimes at the very, very bottom. I was going to ask how you got it to...
At the top, it's just a newer version. They moved stuff around recently, and I don't know why. They just did. So.
I'll update it when I have it.
What now? You should update. I mean, you know, everyone's always scared about updating Lightroom because of glitches and weird slowness and everything. But as a general rule, like maybe hold back one version, but they've always made some iterative improvement with it. Dehaze is a great tool. You want access to it. But here's how I use Better Touch Tool, going back to that for a second. So you can say, okay, when I hit the A key, I want my mouse to move to a position. Or I want my mouse to move to a position, then I want it to left click for me, then I want it to move to another position, then I want it to right click for me. You can create literally cascades of like a series of actions, or you can have like one simple action, whatever you want. So if you haven't noticed yet, you should realize it now. When you float your mouse over a slider in Lightroom, you get this little highlight on it, and that enables you to use the arrow keys up and down to make the adjustment. You have much more control over your exact value using arrow keys than you do like using your mouse clicker. So what I do is when I hit the A key, no matter where my mouse is on the screen, it jumps back to temperature. When I hit the S key, it jumps over to tint. When I hit the F key, it jumps over to exposure. And those are just 3 keys that my hand can easily sit on and not have to move. So without moving at all, I can jump my mouse between temp, tint, and exposure, my 3 most used edits, instantly, always. And then I can arrow up to, or down to adjust exposure very, very quickly. The other great thing is if you hold shift, you get really, really big jumps to like get it at least quickly close to where you want it to be. And you let go of shift and you get small little increments so you can dial it in perfectly. Again, this is saving like those half seconds, those full seconds of like finding where's my mouse and then dragging it over, and just constant moving of your mouse that add up, of course over a 1,000 image wedding or something like that. Pretty great.
So the program is called what again?
Better Touch Tool. Better Touch Tool. And yeah, say you want to create a new shortcut. You click Add New Shortcut. Say what key you want it to be, or key combination or whatever. I'm just going to say the V key. Even if it already does something in Lightroom, this will totally override it. And then you can say do a predefined action. And then you can just go through this whole list and see what the heck is available. I mean, it's insane. So if we just go to mouse clicks, you can have it left click. If you go to other actions, you can have it move to a position. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to have it move up here to the library thing. You just hit the space bar and it captures the X and Y axis, saves it. Now when I'm in Lightroom, every time I hit the V key, my mouse will go exactly to that spot every time. The catch, as you may have figured out by now, is that your window always has to be full screen or in the exact same spot every time. You can't have it move or it'll buck up. Where it gets a little more fun and interesting is other more complicated tasks. So that's great for exposure and white balance, but one of the things I do a lot is cropping. So I have it set, so if I hit Command 1, I have it move my mouse to the crop tool, click that, move my mouse over here, click that, move my mouse down here to 1 by 1, click that, and then leave my mouse right here in the middle for me to adjust exactly where I want it to be. It does all of those steps without me having to do anything but hit, in theory, Command 1. Done. And I can just, dial it in exactly how I want. I have one for Command 2, makes it a 16 by 9. Done. So that's really great. Highly recommend it. I've got a huge series of tons of stuff that you can look at if you want, but part of the magic of Better Touch Tool is you build things that make sense for your brain. And it is tedious and it does take time in the beginning, but I swear to God, it will save you just exponentially more as you use it and just commit to it. That's it. Let's see. Yeah, these other ones are just kind of pointless. I don't even use them that much. Just something as simple as like having a preset that you use a lot, just map that to your #1 key. And then boom, it'll always just apply that preset when you hit the #1 key. Like even that is really useful. Cool. The other tool that I use most often while editing is the gradient tool. Mostly just to emphasize like a vignette effect. One of the problems I have with the actual vignette tool, which we'll get to down at the bottom, is that it is always sort of an oval shape, weighted toward the center. And you want more of like a blob shape with your vignette. Yeah, what I mean by that is this. Here, let me reset my crop. And I'm going to find an earlier picture that has a preview rendered. There we go. Yeah, something where they're smiling in love. So, I probably should have underexposed this even more. Oh man, it looks horrible on the projector. It's not quite as blown out as it looks on the projector. But okay, say I'm working with an image like this. I'm going to dial in my exposure first. Ta-da, a little bit of white balance. Great. Then I'll hit the M key, which is like the default Lightroom gradient tool. Or you can click up here, this little rectangle. And you'll see you can have this tool do any effect that you want. I just use like a -0.3 or -0.4 exposure. Just drag it in. It'll slightly darken it. Maybe it's not as dark as I want. You could make it darker, but what I recommend is just dragging another one of the same value in a slightly different position and intensity. So drag it in again, drag it in again. And what you're doing is just like creating this blob shape to your vignette versus a perfect oval. And if your couple isn't center weighted where their faces are, like you can weight toward that corner or that side of the frame. They're kind of in the upper right center here.
Do you press Shift or Command to add a new gradient as you're just doing it?
Oh, I have to think about it.
Wait, you just like how you did all those so quick.
I just literally, you just drag again.
Oh, it does a new one.
Yep, so so I drag this in, as soon as I let go and mouse over, it just, anywhere it'll drag another. Yeah, of the exact same value you did last time. Yeah, being a little excessive for this photo. But yeah, it is not unusual to have a dozen gradients or more. And then you can also make adjustments like color things. So this green here, or maybe this yellowy orange over there, you can drag a gradient in, go to here to color, and like make that gradient whatever color you want. Normally, I'll just bring out whatever color is actually there just to emphasize it some more, especially with yellows, oranges, stuff like that, maybe blues. Yeah, it's just magic. This is the kind of thing you want to get it to where you think it looks good and then dial it back like 80%, because you will do it too heavy in the beginning. Look how reliable my Lightroom is. That error code finally just came through from when it crashed 20 minutes ago. Anyway, cool. I just want to work my way down the chain here of edits that get applied as a baseline. My tone curve never changes. It does if I have a develop preset, but if I'm using any of the normal profiles, this is the tone curve that gets applied.
Anything in the red, green, or blue values?
Nope. Keep those zeroed out. Less is more with these camera profiles. Yeah, you don't want to dive into, I found at least. I keep it RGB, and then by default, this is actually a clickable button. A lot of people don't realize this little square down here. If you click that, you get to adjust the extremes, the nodes of this tone curve. And the reason you want to do that is this, mostly related to fade and highlights. So just to show you the histogram for a second. You read the histogram the same, or the tone curve the same way you read a histogram from left to right. It's shadows, midtones, and highlights. You can see here, I've got shadows all the way to the far left, full shadows. But if I click and make a node down here and pull this up, it starts to create almost like a brick wall, like a limit, to where it says, I'm not going to show any shadows below this point. And the higher that node is, the more fade. That basically just results in like a faded look, because it's getting rid of those deep blacks. So that's what's creating a fade effect, which is kind of hard to see right now, but I usually keep mine right around 10%. So I'm going to bring it, let me just bring it back down here. Now the problem with creating fade in an image is that it washes it out quite a lot. If I get rid of these two nodes here, it's just a super flat, ugly faded image. So what you want to do is create some combination of nodes here to darken your shadows, and then maybe here to brighten your highlights. Which is essentially just adding contrast on top of the entire image. And it's called an S-curve because it is the subtle shape of an S. But that's about where I've got mine. I never touch these, with two exceptions. One, like really mismatched skin tones, or like a really wicked spray tan or something. I'll do, or sunburn. I'll do orange saturation, like -10, -15. It seems to neutralize most issues. Maybe I'll play with hue settings and stuff if they're really crazy skin tones, but generally I stay away from this. What I found is that you can dial in your HSL settings to like make a perfect one-off image, but it just does not translate across a dynamic multi-environment wedding day. And it's just more trouble than it's worth to try and apply all of these variables to every image in your gallery.
So you never bring the luminance of your blue down for those?
That's the other exception.
Okay.
So it's orange saturation or desaturation or blue luminance to help kind of selectively darken the sky. If I have a blue sky and I'm really pushing dynamic range to its limits. I think we had a blue sky somewhere, but this might be good. Window. Was it at the beginning?
I think it's the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. So blue luminance, but again, just light touch.
Yeah.
Like my order for maximizing dynamic range is generally boost my exposure to where they look good. This is a horrible pose, but I'll find a better one later. My computer's not slow. Boost my exposure to where they look good. Now it's a raw file. So yes, the highlights are super blown out. That's bad, but it's a raw file. So the data's still there. So boost exposure, pull back highlights, add gradients to just darken, 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 as close as I can get it without it looking artificial. Then I add a little bit of blue luminance to sweeten it up and selectively darken the blues only. Like -10, -15, it starts to look really artificial really fast. So that's sort of the order of how I do it. Dial in exposure, highlights, -100 or however much, gradients, blue luminance. Okay. Now the last big thing, split toning. Split toning essentially allows you to like mask your image in a color shade in two different zones, highlights or shadows. Unfortunately, one reason Capture One is actually a really great piece of software. They also give you a mid-tone split tone, which is really great. Lightroom just elected not to do that. So one of the ways that I try and dial in control of my mid-tone colors, excuse me, is by balancing far, far, far to the right. Do you see this balance slider here? By default, it's at 0. So if I balance sort of over in this range, it's going to emphasize more in the highlights and less in the shadows and kind of like right in this mid-tony range. The reason mid-tones are important is because that's where most skin tones are, mid-tone / highlight area. And yeah, basically I just have a warmer orangey highlight hue applied, lightly saturated. And then the shadow color, usually like a lime green or whatever color I want. Thank you. No, that's really nice.
Because I do 44, and I was like trying to get near you. And
44 here?
Yeah, for
Yep.
you, so yeah.
Yep. I think, what was mine? I might have moved it just now. I think I actually have it at 42 by default.
Okay.
I'm not sure. It's not going to be like the perfect formula. Yeah, as long as you're close and you understand the concept of what's happening.
Yeah. I think I read somewhere where you said like use it to bring out the up the mids between the lows and highs or something.
So what it does is a lot of people like to create a tone like on top of their images. Either it's like a blue vibe or a yellow vibe or whatever. And a lot of people do that with HSL and white balance. But I found that like split toning allows you to kind of blend, get your white balance close to where it looks right, and then blend it with split toning, and you get actually more like this brownish tone to everything that I really like. Yeah. It's sort of warm, but it's also sort of brown in a way that you can't really explain or control, obviously. So yeah, you're kind of playing this game of like split tone, always masked on everything. I rarely adjust or nudge it away from these settings, and then white balance in to dial it in perfectly. And split toning, it is subtle. It's like the last 5% of the edit. It's almost not even noticeable when you toggle it on and off. But when you lay it across every image in your gallery or whatever, like there is a layer of consistency there that is really nice.
Yeah,
even.
I love that with your photos. That
Yep.
what you're saying, that brownish.
And then one fun thing is like I'll play around with the shadow tint and suddenly get like a new dimension, a new dynamic to my editing, and it'll look different. But like not in a way that looks like I bought a whole new preset pack and like this isn't me. It's subtle changes. So yeah.
So
Hopefully that makes sense. Detail, lens corrections, all of this stuff, I just use as needed. If I have a distractingly distorted shot, I'll correct for it. Otherwise, I just leave the distortion on by default. I don't play with this stuff at all. Generally, I just leave it zeroed out. And calibration, the same, just zeroed out.
So you don't mess with the vignetting on the lens profile at all?
Nope.
Oh.
All my vignetting type effect comes from gradients. Just dragging them in, or shooting 1.4 with a wide open lens. You're getting a natural vignette there anyway, which is one reason I like shooting prime lenses so much. Yeah. But, and then just to go through it, I think it's because I'm doing the screen recording that it's just taking an insanely long time to render these previews. I do want to explain just sort of quickly the concept of how I call and flag and all that kind of stuff. Essentially at this state, once everything is rendered, I flag my keepers. So first pass is just gut instinct, like I like this for whatever reason, as long as it's something that I can modify and change later. So if the expression's wrong, if focus is totally missed, I blew out highlights or something in a way that's unrecoverable, I don't select it. But if it's something I can dial in perfectly later, yeah, I'll keep it. And I'm very, very generous the first pass. I'll just call like half the session right now. This is getting ridiculous, and I need some speed. So, yeah, I mean, I started the screen recording again, but what you saw earlier in terms of speed should be exactly what you expect. Once standard previews are rendered, and especially when smart previews are rendered, like it should be like running water speed. Okay, let me just call a bit of the beginning, just because we're going to run out of time. But I will edit the whole session and like share it in the group and stuff like that. Oh. Excellent. So in library mode, I flag my keepers. Probably a little hard to see. It's a little easier on my screen. This is way too underexposed. I mean, it's not so much that it's a problem. I can definitely recover it, but there's no reason for it to be this dark other than that I was just being lazy or talking my face off without paying attention. At this stage, it is just a quick pass gut instinct thing. I try not to second guess myself and just commit to whatever options I choose. Roughly like 1 or 2 expressions or moments in a pose. Tilt shift, really hard. This tilt shift or free lensing would be a situation where maybe I would zoom in one to one just to double check that I'm perfectly sharp.
Sam, what do you do for clients that ask for like all the 5 or?
If I have a client that's asking about more additional images, I tell them I don't have them. That I deliver everything that turns out. And honestly, I do. Like if I'm not delivering something, it's because, she looks like this, or he looks like whatever. Like, yeah, there's no reason I would ever withhold files that turn out. Yeah, please record that and send that to them. Maybe I will for them, just because they're kind of a goofy couple, and I will deliver like goofy, unflattering images for some people if it's in their nature, and I think that that's something that would appeal to them. But yeah, that's part of the judgment. I mean, they're hiring you as a photographer. So what's the difference between them trusting you to take or not take a picture versus deliver or not deliver a photo? Like you're not withholding better stuff for any reason, I would imagine. So yeah, I just tell them I don't have them. If somebody like creates the case that, hey, somebody just got really sick or has passed away, I'll definitely take another look through everything and see if there's anything usable. But I'm generally over-delivering anyway. I do err on the side of like, they're gonna love this as a memory more than is this technically perfect in what I deliver for the full gallery. So usually I don't have the question, and maybe I just don't care about technical perfection as much as some photographers. Because yeah, some photographers are very, very picky. They'll deliver like 40 images in an engagement session. I'm like, whoa, I deliver 140. And they're not all perfect or amazing, but that's just the deal, so. think I really like, yeah, I liked seeing his actual face more. Oh, it's interesting little V-shape happening. But not loving the light on her eyes. They're a little better when she's looking at me. Yeah, kind of a wash. Interesting idea to play with, but his poor nose. He was literally like getting sunburned in front of my camera lens. Like, poor guy. Okay, so this one, I like the more serious vibe. I'm just gonna pick 1 or 2 of the center expression and then 1 or 2 of the side ones. When I'm ready to merge them, you just hold Command, select all the images you want in the stitch, right click, Photo Merge Panorama. And that's going to blend them all as raw file DNG files. So you can then edit the fully stitched panorama as if it's a raw file and do full white balancing and all of that kind of stuff. So pretty straightforward. Takes a little while to render, so I'm not going to wait for that right now. Cool. Any questions? And it doesn't have to be about like editing or...
What's like something like, do you have any go-tos for getting those natural laughs out of people? Like I know for what Steve is like
Fair?
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair, like his look at my penis thing or something. He said in a workshop, and I thought that was crazy. It cracked me up. But I was wondering if you had one of those types of go-tos.
No. Nope. It just comes off as creepy for me.
Yeah, no, that's why.
When I say it, not that he's creepy.
I couldn't say it.
Yeah, I don't have a great Mexican accent to like lean on.
It makes it more funny.
It totally does. And I mean, you have to pick up on the fact that like what works for somebody isn't going to for another. And it's just,
sure.
I feel incredibly embarrassed and awkward. It will make them laugh, but I'm too uncomfortable to do
so
it.
weird.
So I'm not going to. And it's okay. I still get couples laughing. Maybe it's not always like a giant belly laugh the way Fair can do at every wedding, but you know, that's okay. It's just what it is. I'm perfectly happy with this. I really look for these muscles contracting in people's eyes. These are involuntary muscles, and once those contract and light up, like that's what I'm on. And once I have that in a portrait, I'm done and I move on.
Well, I've just noticed in a lot of your work, you get really great expressions like constantly, so I was like, there must be something.
It's really just about kind of, I do pick fun at them a little bit if they have, you know, and so that changes every session depending on what they're doing or what they've said, and it keeps it fun and different for me, and it makes them feel like maybe I'm not using like a canned thing that I tell everybody, even though people always laugh at penises. I don't know why. Yeah, here's where I've run out of renders, and we are running a little short on time, so I feel super bad, except that this will be in video form in a longer format. But once everything's edited, I sort by flag, and then I use a PicTime upload plugin right here. Most big gallery hosts support this feature, but it's dependent on them completely. You just type in your username and password, click and drag, you create the gallery name, you create the settings about your resolution, your sharpening settings, all that. I sharpen for screen standard, pretty straightforward. And then you just hit publish. There will be a little publish button up here, and it gets converted as a RAW file, sent as a JPEG to PicTime, where it sits for eternity. Yeah.
Are you adding grain to your photos still?
No, not really. The order of operations should be resize image, then sharpen, then add grain.
Yeah.
And if I want clean grain, so clients aren't resizing to a 4x6 and all the grain gets like compressed in and gross.
Yeah, that's what I liked about Alien Skin Exposure, that their way they
Yeah.
do their grain is nice.
It is
Only
awesome.
after I've exported to like 2048 or something pixels.
Yeah. Awesome. That's literally all there is to Lightroom. I've hidden the other 2 sections, but all right, we'll wrap up. I have one note to leave you guys on. And we'll be done. Can I stand for this? It's gonna totally break off. Not that I need to take a bow or anything silly like that. It's just a quote from Steve Jobs. And this really speaks to me about personal style as a photographer. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you just have to trust that they'll somehow connect in your future. And this happened to align perfectly with a meme that I found on the internet that speaks about kind of literally dots on a board. of knowledge versus experience. And identifying your style is a constant evolution. I never set out to like photograph an image this way, have it result in this like years worth of like Sam Hurd photos that have a distinct triangular shape or prism effect to them. This is all pure evolution, and it mostly just comes from like going out and trying stuff 250,000 times in a year, or however many you're possibly able to. So I'll leave you with that thought. Sorry for the slightly rushed ending, but it's the way it happens sometimes. You guys are welcome to just pack up and linger around, but we should probably get out of here so they can give tours. Keep in touch online, and I'll post tons of follow-up stuff in the actual group. And make sure you request to get added to the Epic group. That's the big one. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.